Yakety, yakety, yak.
All right. Well, I don't think we have any like announcements or anything like that. So I guess we can go straight to presentations.
Okay. I guess that's me then. I wanted to be more prepared, but my morning has been busy. So I wrote up a document about pull requests and what I see folks doing and what I see folks not doing. And then I forgot about it for like 3 weeks. And so we'll see if this makes any sense as I just go through it. We have a goal in this company to produce high quality software. And in the past, we haven't had strict pull requests. And then when we implemented them, our quality went up. And so it's an integral part of producing quality software to do our pull requests, do our code reviews, and get them done in a timely manner. So we're going to cover the pull request lifecycle. So you should take the following steps given at certain points in the pull request lifecycle, of starting with before development. Let me see if I can pull up the developer lifecycle, because it's always good to cover that. And I'm going to do it right in front of y'all so you can see it. I don't know how many people have not gone through the wiki, but everybody should have gone through the wiki and read everything in it. Come on now. So expand it and go to the index. You should have read everything in here, but there are a few new documents of note. There's an identity server document, which is probably maybe a little in flux, I'm not sure. There is the security policies document, but down here under Dev Workflow, we bring this up all the time, but as far as pull requests go, it starts here. Before you ever start developing software, when you pick a task, you decide if you're going to, if the estimates are good on it, and if not, you deal with the PM. But you don't make any changes to the code until you create a branch for it. So when you create a branch, if you have unsaved changes in another branch, you need to commit or revert them so that you have a clean slate to create your branch. Do a checkout on master. That's going to happen a lot. I've been getting calls every 5 minutes. Let me see if I can shut that down. Okay. Now, so you do a checkout on master, and when you do the checkout, you can branch from there. If you're branching off of anything besides master, we have a problem. And the problem may not be obvious. In fact, I have trouble articulating when that's going to be a problem, but it becomes a problem depending on what other branches are going to be merged into master later on, and what files are in them, and a couple of other things. So you always want to be checking out on master. If you aren't checking out on master because you have one branch that depends on another, that's something that we're going to talk about. And you still should be doing the checkout on master if you can. So when you create your branch, you need to name it according to the source control standards, which are on another wiki page. Under S. And I'm going to take the notes that I've written down here eventually and integrate them in this document or create another document that references it. But we have the branch names specified in these source controls, in this source control standards document. So you need to be naming it accordingly. You'll sometimes see that I've used lowercase letters instead of the capital F for features, for example, because we ran into a problem that I don't think we ever really did figure out, where Git was creating duplicate branches by the same name with different case, And it's not just the way we typed it in. It was doing something to us. And I haven't seen that in a while, so maybe that's not an issue anymore. But do try to name it according to this document.
It is an issue. The issue occurs when you have like some of these base prefixes, like features release hotfixes, that are of different case that exist already on the server. That's when you run into issue. So if we were all following it exactly, we wouldn't have the issue.
Well, I had it in my head that we might have had other issues, but we'll discuss that offline. Do try to follow the document here. If you run into those problems, get with us and we'll work it out. So that's a capital F or a capital R or a capital H for releasing hotfixes, to be clear. Your dev initials, I guess it's up to you what those are, but make them consistent, right? So create your branches according to these standards. When you do
updated that document, can you refresh it?
Yes. Why, look at that.
There we go.
It looks like there's something missing in here, but I assume you're putting in the, you want to put in the username instead of the initials. Is that right?
Yeah, it looks like it didn't save it for some reason.
Yeah, I've had some trouble with this wiki making it do what I want, but that'll be fixed soon, I'm sure. Okay, so when you do a checkout, there can be a two-step process. And I have Git branching up here, and I'm going to be using that a bit here. And you've all seen, well, I assume you've all seen Dan do this. I think everybody who's here now was here at the time. Dan did a great presentation using this tool. And this is a limited, crippled version of Git with a visualization to it. And it doesn't involve files at all, just branches. So the URL for this is learngitbranching.js.org. And you can see down in the corner here, I have a command prompt, a pseudo command prompt, and I can issue Git commands. A lot of them don't work, and it'll say, sorry, this isn't supported, too bad. And that's mostly okay, except for one thing, which I'll talk about when we get there. Dan and Nate know exactly what it is. So if I do, I've got this repository with the master branch, and you can see this little asterisk means that I'm currently on that branch. So if I wanted to create a new feature branch, I would do a git branch features nzog add in Unity IOC, right? And it'll create that branch. I don't have any commits on it, so it's pointing to the same ref as master, and so you'll see that both of those are now pointing to C1. And if I do that, you'll notice that the asterisk still points to master. And I screw this up all the time. So now I'll do a commit. And bummer, I did that commit on master. I meant to do a checkout on features on
It truncated the name before the
yeah,
first time.
it truncated the name. Fine. Well, that's silly, but anyway, I meant to do it here. So when I do it that way, I've screwed up and I have to take this C2 off of master. It's better to do your initial, in fact, let me just reset this. I'll press F5 and it comes to the beginning here. Just click the checkbox and then press escape on this. Instead of doing a git branch, I'll do a git checkout -b to create the branch. I'm just going to use short names for the demonstration here because it's goofing on me. And now it does a checkout and a branch all in one. So I'm currently checked out on feature 1 as I intended. So this is the only way I do it so that I don't make that mistake. So I recommend everybody do it that way. If you're using a tool, it probably shells out to the Git command line to do the same thing, and it'll have a similar behavior if you find the right, there's probably a checkbox for it in the dialog or something like that. But try to do it all in one operation. So now we've got the before development taken care of, and we have a branch where we can start coding. So during development, this may or may not have so much to do with pull requests, but just in general, I've got some notes that might be useful. So avoid doing the following just during your development, because these are the things that come up during code reviews. Writing hard-coded literals in your debug code. For example, Dan says, I can also type reset instead of resetting the page. I figured there was probably a way, but I typed help to find out, and it didn't tell me. I was actually going to ask afterward. But let's try that. Cool. That's what I want. Great. Avoid hard-coded literals in your debug code. For example, a console write line, the contents of a string list to a text file on your C drive in your C/users/bill directory, right? Just, yeah, of course you don't want to check those things in, but it's better to just not even type them out. Don't even put them in there. We've run into that a couple of times and decided that folks need to just take the time to put in proper logging and use the logging instead of things like console write lines and things like that. If you want to, if you end up setting setting variables that you just want to run it, visualize it, debug, usually you can avoid those too, but if you can't, make sure you minimize them and don't check them in. Writing temporary code. If you're writing temporary code, don't put it in the files that you're putting regular changes in. If you can, put them in their own file so that you can keep those separate as much as possible so they don't get added to the code base. And if you do have to write temporary code anywhere, be sure to precede it with a to-do comment so that you don't forget about it and actually commit it. So before you ever do a commit, you're going to want to do a check for to-dos. And it would be great if there were no to-dos in there, but of course, sometimes they have to stay. But look for those ones that you've written and make sure that you rip those things out before a commit. Putting developer-specific code in any files that will be checked into source control, don't want to do that. So for example, if you have a code base that has a connection string to a database that runs in production, you don't debug against that. You're probably going to end up pointing it to a local instance or an instance on our dev Docker server or something like that. Those changes should be in there, but they shouldn't be in there specific to your machine. Those changes need to be in something like the dev JSON file, the app settings JSON file for the developer. If you're not sure how to do that, we can help with that. And we do it in every project. And then those things don't get checked in. So that's it for the during development, the things that you don't want to put in the code. After your development, you're going to want to check the things in, but there's more to it than that. So you want to test the app, right? A lot of the code reviews that we do, we find that folks probably maybe the thing builds or maybe it doesn't, but they didn't actually run it and test it. And testing means two things. In this case, we're not talking about unit tests. We're talking about actually exercising the application. So build it, make sure it builds. Run it, make sure it runs. Exercise it and make sure that the features that you've changed do what you want. Make sure that the features that you didn't change but were maybe affected do what they should have done before you changed, and make sure you didn't break anything. Verify that unit tests build, run, and pass because you should have written unit tests. And that's part of the build process if ever it's set up for continuous integration. But continuous integration or not, you should be running the unit tests before you commit, and they should pass on your machine. If they don't pass on your machine, you probably have a problem with some dependencies, and those unit tests shouldn't have those dependencies and should be revised to not have those dependencies. And that's something that we've been talking about a lot recently, and we'll probably do another lunch and learn on. But unit tests should not have a bunch of, ideally they would have no dependencies, and probably should have no dependencies. And if they do have dependencies, they're not good unit tests and they should be fixed. Use a proper tool to look at every single line of every single file that has been staged for commit. This is probably the most important thing in your code review process, at least at first. There should never be a file committed that you didn't look at or a line committed that you didn't actually look at every single line when you do your staging. So that can be hard to do with just the command line tools. This is the one time that I use an actual graphical tool for my my pull requests or for my commits for any Git operation. It's nice to have a graphical tool that will show you a proper diff and let you just click on one file after another to view them. And any tool you have will do, as long as it's a proper tool. So if you're using Gmaster, that works. If you're using Tortoise, that works. If you're using, what's the one I use? SourceTree, that's fine. If you're using Visual Studio Code, that's fine. They all do this. But just make sure that you look at every single one as you add them. And that probably solves 50% of the problems we have with our code reviews. If you find any that you didn't mean to commit, unstage them or even revert them. If you find any commented code, remove that. If you've commented out any code yourself, remove that. Watch for white space differences. So if you have, let me just launch a Visual Studio here and just bring up some project. A lot of us have plugins for Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code that will notify us that there's white space inconsistency. The newest versions of them have the stuff built in. So let's see. This is pulling up on the other screen here. Just give me a second. Well, it might be pulling up. Okay. Now, when I have code up on my machine, I have white space visible. So let me show you where I do that. Maybe I don't remember where I do that. Display view white space right here in your text editor. When you turn that on, you'll see these arrows for tabs, and you'll see these dots for spaces. And I recommend that everybody turn these on in every system that they use. I have the same thing in Visual Studio Code. And if well, it's really dim in here, but you can see the spaces there, and you can, this is Python, so I can see that this one's set up for 4 spaces instead of a tab for the indentation. Now, when I have it set that way, I can see without the tool telling me that I have white space inconsistency. In here, you just go to View and check Render White Space. So watch for those things. And if you have white space that needs to be fixed, be sure and fix that. And it depends on the tool, what you want to, how you're going to do that. But, we can help with that if you need. So watch for white space differences. Watch for debug code and remove it. We already talked about what those things are. Anything you put in there to just try and figure out what the app is doing, remove it. Once you've done any changes, build and retest and restart the process. And that doesn't mean unit test. It means retest the exercises that we were talking about as well, because any change you make can break stuff. Hopefully not removing commented code. That should not break stuff. Once you're ready to commit your changes, add any files to the stage that aren't in the repo yet. Make sure you're not just staging the changed files, but missing files as well. If your tool does not do that, you got to use a different tool. Missing files causes a lot of chaos with other developers trying to work on the same project, and it's the last thing you want to do. Make sure you build it again before you check in. If you've got code that you didn't have staged, or you may have made changes to, or didn't make changes to, whatever, once you stage it, that's the actual code that gets committed to the build. That's the last code you want to make sure it still builds. And if that still builds, then you know that it's not going to change. Even if you make changes to the file system, the staging in Git doesn't allow those changes to go into the commit. Once it's staged, it's a snapshot of those files. So that's the actual image of code that's going to end up in the build. So that's when you do your last build and possibly your last test. That means doing a full build. That means an NPM install. That means a Visual Studio build. That means if you've got any post-build events or scripts that you need to run, you do those. If you're working with Python, apologize to your victims and check the linter, because that's the best you got, but that's what you can do. Then you commit and do this and send the pull request. So let's talk about pull requests. When I have a pull request, I'm going to create a new message. And I have a little script down here in AutoHotkey, and we've all heard about it. It's the one I put in Slack. And I think it's just this one. So to activate it, I just go into the subject and type PR email, and I can press space, tab, or enter. And it's going to go into this script, and I'll type in the project name, and I'll say Auto, which is an actual one, but it's not a company one. And I'll say features, and it will type out that stuff for me, but it leaves a description. And the description should contain the overall changes were that the developer or the reviewer should be aware of, and anything else you think might be necessary. Now, there is one other thing that you may need to put in here that's not in the script, and I left it out because it seems to be pretty rare. But on Drummond, for example, I also have a repo name, because there are about 12 repos in the Drummond project, and changes could span any of them. So I may even need more than one repo. And so if there's anything additional you need to put in there that the script doesn't handle, be sure to put it in there. But if you put it in here using the script, there are a couple of things that go on. One, this subject is carefully crafted so that the reviewer can see what this email is a PR for and what that email is a PR for. So if you have 5 reviews for a single project, they don't all just say project 1 PR, because looking at the email threads, you can't tell which one is which without clicking on them. And then you say, okay, I know what that one is. You click back to your inbox. Which one did I just click on? It's a nightmare. So having a proper subject line in there, it should make a big difference as far as the review process goes. When we do feedback, the reviewer will click reply to this, or reply. They should click reply all, and that will put a subject line in here that says something like that. And that will end up in the same thread in your inbox. But if you instead change that subject to something like, any change at all, it's going to create a new thread. And now you've got the same review going across 2 threads, and it's really impossible to track. So make sure that you never change this after the first pull request is made. I'm a little surprised at how many people didn't learn these basic things about email, and I won't name names, but I guess email is so old now that folks just don't learn these things. So now you know, maybe you learned something. Once this is sent, the reviewers, Dan, Phil, and Nate, all understand that a punctual review is important, and we try to get to them within 48 hours. 24 would be better, but the fact is some days we just don't do pull requests every day. And that's okay, and that should be okay if you waited 2 days for a pull request. If it's not going to be okay, feel free to tell Dan, hey, I just sent you a pull request. This one's going to be holding me up. Appreciate more punctual attention than usual. Have a great day. He understands that. He understands that that happens all the time. Just make sure you're not coming at him with, I need this, do it now. You're killing me here. 2 minutes after you send the pull request, right? So he has a job to do, and I have a job to do. We all have a job to do. Just try to remember. Let's see what's next on the list here. Oh, on the other side, once they've sent you the feedback, if they got back to you within an hour, for example, it's just as important for the feedback to be addressed as soon as possible as well. And it shouldn't take 24 hours to get the feedback done, addressed. So once you've fixed those things, make sure that you fixed everything that was in the feedback and make sure that you fix it as soon as possible. So what happens is once you've done a pull request, you frequently have other branches or other changes that are dependent on that pull request. And the longer that pull request is out there, the faster or the more stagnant that code becomes, and the harder it becomes to progress with regular work because that might be dependent on that branch, on that pull request. So both sides need to be punctual about it. If you have a lot of feedback to address or a big change to do, you may want to try and arrange things so that your code reviews are not so that new development is not dependent on that pull request. And we're going to cover a couple of ways that you can do that in this presentation, if I can hurry up. Let's see. I don't want to pull up any example pull requests because I don't want to pick on anybody, but I think that covers it. Dan, do you have any feedback on this? Because this is your area.
So far, no. But if there is, I'll bring it up.
I am
Okay.
going to add, please review the reviewer notes carefully. They take a lot of effort to create those. And if you're just sending the pull request back without, addressing the concerns or discussing the concerns at the very least, if you don't understand them, ask about them. It's really frustrating to see the same problems in the same pull request over and over and over again, and having to give that feedback over and over and over again is kind of demoralizing for the reviewer.
Great. I was also going to say, as far as this goes, some of these others are carefully crafted as well. I really like that. I mean, this is petty, I know, but it was the branch is on one line, so that I can just drag that cursor all the way to the left to highlight it and copy and paste it. Always copy and paste these things if you can. A major problem we have had is with people manually typing out branch names and messing them up. Always copy and paste a branch name if you can. And as with the script, if you're not using the script, fine, but put the branch on its own line so that there's no trouble copying, pasting, and understanding where those where that field data ends. Okay. If you have a pull request feedback that's large and is going to take a while, feel free to not just work through email. If Dan sends you a page-long bit of feedback, and make no mistake, he does that to all of us, and you think that you can't have a proper email conversation with him about it and kind of understand where he's coming from, get on IM or walk into his office. I don't know that he likes you walking into his office, but if you need a face-to-face, go walk in his office and get it straightened out. So it doesn't do any good to write all that stuff up if you don't understand it. And if it's not clear, you won't understand it. If it is clear, you still might not understand it. It's okay to go and try another medium and come to an understanding so that you fix it right the first time. I think we need to have more of that myself. Okay, so after committing your changes, you've sent this pull request. Looks like my notes are a little redundant. Give me a second here. Okay, down at the bottom here, pull request process. Designated reviewers will get to the work when they can. Once it's accepted, rejected, and okay, I think I've covered everything in my notes here. So let's look at dependent branches. So what we have generally is something that looks like, let me get my other notes out here. Just create a scenario here real quick. I have a feature one branch. Okay. So I've created a feature one branch and it has a couple of commits on it. And then other people are over here doing branches and getting PRs pulled in. And so master is growing. And now I'm ready to do a pull request on feature one. And it takes a day or two for it to get done. But I have more work to do that depends on feature one. So over here on feature one, I'm going to do a git check out. And so now when I do a pull request on feature one, I have branched feature two off of a branch. And this is the no-no that we want to try to avoid. And there are a couple of other things that'll happen. Feature one is based on a common ancestor of master, but C4 and C5 are new to master. And so we may have merge conflicts in there, and that's fine. They'll deal with that in a pull request. But occasionally we'll end up merging master back into feature one before we merge feature one back into master. But in addition to that, we may have changes in feature two, C2 or C3 that end up in a feature branch that gets merged into master. So some of that stuff ends up in master unbeknownst to us or beyond our control. And so that's where features for feature two or feature one can become a problem. Feature one we can merge, but once feature two is in there with feature one merged and some other code from C2 and C3 in master as well, we're going to have big problems. And so let's do a scenario that looks like that for real, I think. And there are two ways that we can address this. And one is easy and not recommended, and one is harder and is recommended. And I'll show you both. So in Drummond, just for fun, I have let's do another repo. It's got stuff going on. Should be good. So I'm going to do a git checkout -d feature one. And you can see that I'm on feature one. And I'll make some changes here. I don't know what they'll be. How about we ruin the Docker file? That sounds like fun. And we'll just save that. And I'll git add Docker file. And before I did that, what did I do? I wanted to dip it. I wanted to look at every line before I stage it, right? Well, it's not too late. So this is something I should have looked at before I did a commit. So now I've looked at that and it looks good. It's what I expected. So I can backward commit. Git commit. Okay. Now, if I have another change that depends on this, let's say maybe I want to git checkout. In fact, let's not do that. Let's add a file. That's not what I want. Okay. So I'll add. Well, I can't add my new file because it'll end up in the same branch. So while I'm waiting on that to be merged, I have my new file.txt that needs to be added, and I need to be making changes to it. But I can't do a pull request on this branch because I've got changes that have got to go into it. So I want to create a new branch that branches off of this, and that's bad. Instead, I can just kind of work along here. And do my changes as I normally would until feature 1 is merged. And at that point, I can say I want to create a feature 2 branch based off of master, because my new file 1.txt and the modified Docker file, if I decide to put it in there, or sorry, I got that wrong. My first changes to Docker file are going to be in master. And so when I do a branch off of master after it's been merged, I can take these changes to Docker file, and this new file can go on top of it. The way to do that is with a git stash. If I do a git status, I have untracked files and I have changed files. The untracked files will not stash. Those just sit on your hard drive. There's no staging for them. Once they're tracked, your stash can manage them. So everything in this list will be ignored by the stash, and everything in this list will be adhered to. And I'll do a git stash show, and this will show me that there are no stash entries. If I have stash entries, I've got unfinished business that either I better know what was in it, or I got to clear it out first. And to clear it out, I still got to know what was in it. So hopefully this is always clear, and there are no stash entries. So I can git stash. And now it shows that my untracked files are still there, but my tracked files have just disappeared. They've gone from the working space into the stage, or into the stash. And if I git stash show now, I can see the Docker file is in there, and it's got some number of changes. So that's cool. I can now check out master. And master now has my feature 1 in it because Dan's merged it. And I can do a git branch 2, and I can git stash pop to take those things out of stash and put them back into the working space, which is now the checked out feature 2 branch. I have a conflict, and so I'm going to have to manage that. When I do that, I'm just going to double click on that file, and I'm going to, I can either git tool that file, which is best, or I can just old school edit the thing. And when I use code, which I recommend, you just do a search for these. There's a merge next conflicts that you can use, but there's no hotkey for it. So I just do a search for 1, 2, 3, 4 chevrons, and it'll just find these diffs. So I can accept current or accept incoming if I want. I know that this is the broken one. Well, I didn't commit it, but in any case, I'm just going to do that again real quick and say, that's the one I want for my next branch. Save it. And then you don't have to do a merge continue on this because there's no actual merge in place when it does that. Once you fix the conflicts, it's just there. Because we're working with files in the working space, not staged files or commit files. So now if I look at git status, I have both of those files back. I'm on feature 2, and I can just git add Docker file, my new file, make sure that I looked at every line and made sure I knew what was in there. And then I can do a commit. So that's how I can take files that have been waiting for a pull request and put them in a new branch that has the dependent branch merged into master by branching off of master and doing a stash pop. Now, this is a really simple way, but only if your stash is clean, and it could be easy to screw it up. I don't usually have too much trouble with it, but Dan and I have talked about it, and I know other folks might just have a different way of working, and they may have trouble with it. The better way to do this is with Git rebase onto, and Git rebase onto is the feature that I was talking about that is not supported in here. So let me see if I can visually demonstrate this. I'm going to take a screenshot. I don't know what that just did. It's not what I wanted. Okay. What this is going to do is take these and make a copy, just like that.
Why are you rebasing that branch instead of your feature 2? Because feature 1 is still eligible to merge straight to master.
I mean to rebase feature 2. I'm going to fix that because I need to be rebasing feature 2. Thanks for that. Where's the, I don't know if there's a redo. Bummer. Let me just do this again.
It's in the top right, Phil, up by the save button.
Oh, I got it.
Or, sorry, I guess top left, but to the right of the top left. Anyway.
Yeah. In fact, why don't we? I'm gonna do this. And that's really what it's going to look like. Okay. So it's going to take feature 2, and it's going to create a copy of that and put it here on master, which is like that. And then this is going to be pointing to C7. So does that make sense?
I'm not sure that's correct. Master
Well,
doesn't move with that point, right?
No, master will not move at that point. You do a rebase onto, and it's going to move C6 and C7 onto C8, which is master. And then as part of the pull request, they're going to move master up to C7.
That's only if it's fast forward merged, which we don't do.
For the simplicity of this, that's the way I've just drawn it, but yes. It's going to end up having a merge node in there. But the idea is, the point that I'm trying to make is that C6 and C7 will be copied, and they'll end up behind the master head. What Nate is saying, if I understand you correctly, Nate, is this this little bit right here where C3 and C5 got a merge node, which becomes C8, is what's going to happen here. Is that what you're saying, Nate?
Well, kind of. I think it might have been better visualized if you would have taken that arrow from C1 to C2 and how it goes to the right, and you'd drawn it as though you just had a merge. Because it's what you're really doing is saying, I'm going back to square one, and I'm going to pretend like I merged off master from the beginning. So it puts you back in the exact same spot as you were for your feature 1.
I just want to clarify something else too. No merging is happening here. That's the whole point of a rebase.
Right. The merging would, when master moves up to here, it would be part of the pull request, part of the reviewer doing that.
Right, which, yeah, like Nate says, we're not going to do a fast forward, so we would get the merge node. Other than that, I think what you've got is perfectly acceptable.
I really wish this tool demonstrated the rebase onto, so I didn't have to do it with the cut and pasted MS Paint. Can you think of a better way to visualize it?
I would just use git k real quick and just create a stupid repo, create a bunch of stupid commits, and then do a rebase.
You mean a rebase onto?
Rebase onto.
Still a rebase.
Well, I know, but it's important to make sure there's a distinction there because they are separate functions, rebase and rebase onto.
I was worried that Git K would be not easy to for some folks to see what I'm really showing them. But we can do that. Should we do that?
If you don't want to, I can quickly do it while you're showing something else and just post screenshots.
I don't know if I have a place to do that.
I was just going to create a whole new repo.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at here. Okay, so I have an initial commit here, and it's going to go from the bottom up instead of top down like this does, but it's going to go from there. Yeah, I'm on feature 1. I even added that. Okay, so here is that same scenario where I branched feature 2 off of feature 1. And I probably am going to want to add some other stuff to master. Keep on doing that forever. Okay. Good. So I hope everybody's followed that. I have some commits in master, and I have a feature 1 branch and a feature 2 branch that depends on changes to it. So if I do, I'm a reviewer, I check out master, I git merge feature 1. I do a push, but there's no upstream. So now I have feature 1 merged with this node, created a new node, and moved master up to it. So now I've got this feature 2 but I really don't want it based on feature 1. I want it based off master. So help me out, Dan, if I screw this up, because I haven't practiced this because the tool didn't support it. But git rebase dash onto the branch in question. Sorry, I want to rebase onto master, starting with everything after that, up to and including that. Yes? Okay. And now my feature 2 has a new base, but you'll find that this thing still exists. So it didn't move this guy. It created a new copy of it onto master. And so this guy can just kind of die in limbo. It'll get pruned later, but this becomes the new feature 2. And so you see change 2 and change 2 are the same. It's the exact same stuff. So better than using Statch, if you have a bunch of stuff that was dependent on another branch, this is how you can fix it later on. But that allows you to do a new branch with the dependent changes and do commits and do your regular workflow so that stuff isn't just sitting out there on your hard drive and you don't have 100 files to copy over from one branch to another, one directly to another, and try to keep track of those in your head. And that's what it'll look like when it's done.
Now do a merge, but make sure you do no fast forward.
So check out on master, and you want to merge feature 2.
Feature 2, no FF. Correct.
Yep. After go in. And so
Perfect.
now, master is based off of feature 2 with the no FF. That's created the merge node. So we end up with that triangle again. Clear as mud. Questions? No questions. I think I'm done. If anybody wants help setting up the auto hotkey and the scripts, get with me and I'll do it. I'd love it if everybody used it. Nobody has to use it, but the consistency would, I think, would very much help the reviewers. And if anybody has a branch that that depends on another branch and they're not sure how to go about this, check the video that we've just made. I assume we're recording. And if that doesn't do it for you, get with me or get with Dan and we can help you out with it. Any other thoughts?
Thanks for doing this, Phil. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Phil.
Cool. Thanks. Bye.